This morning, I'm going to present the findings of a survey that we conducted with Special Forces and Special Operations veterans, Vietnam veterans specifically. And we'll get into some of the results and why we did what we did. So, what is it and why was it conducted? We wanted to assess the effects of Agent Orange specifically on Vietnam veterans, Special Operations, Special Forces people. There are reams of data on Vietnam veterans and Agent Orange. There's nothing, to my knowledge, specifically addressing Special Forces people and Special Operations people and their exposure. Okay? We also wanted to know about potential pass-through genetic damage to our children and grandchildren as a result of our service. So, wrong way. Okay, so you probably have seen this kind of a slide before. The Agent Orange spray areas, all in red. And specifically for our group, guess what we got here, right? RAO, right? And also down in Cambodia. And interestingly enough, for you White Star guys, you got a little love up here on the Bolivian Plateau as well. So we wanted to talk to Special Forces people, Special Ops people who served in the Republic of Vietnam to include cross-border. And we did not factor race, socioeconomic data, cultural components into the data. Now, I know that these components, these particular demographics can factor into things like cancer, hypertension, and so forth, but we included the population as a whole and did not sort out for racial or ethnic component. Okay, so this is a screenshot of the form. The form was sent out via computer, email, and also made available in hard copy. But if you got into your computer and looked at your screen, this is what you got. Now, many of you, of course, did complete the form, and I thank you for it. But if you haven't seen it, we wanted your name, email address, all your contact information. Agent Orange exposure, yes, no. Have you suffered health problems? Yes, no. If you did, what were they, or are they? And how about your children and grandchildren? And if that is pertinent, the name of the child, the problem, are they deceased, and your relationship to the decedent. Now, just a personal note here. All the information is kept confidential. I know the names, and given permission, the attorney on my left will know the names of some of the people. But when I get information that one of my friends and brothers in Special Operations has died of cancer, that so-and-so that I've known for 50 years has prostate cancer, that another one has had a child or grandchild die from one of these conditions, it ain't easy, folks. You know, it just, like they say, you know, statistics. There are 26,000 airmen during World War II shot down. That's a statistic. Okay, yawn. But if you're like my wife, whose father was shot down as a navigator on a B-24, that's a real statistic. Okay, and these statistics are real for me and for us. Okay, enough personal stuff. So, who responded? How many responded? About 219. Of those, 209 were exposed to Agent Orange, and about 185 had health problems, not about, but 185 had health problems related to Agent Orange. So you can see the graph, response, exposure, health problems goes down. So what do we want to do with the results, okay? If Agent Orange has affected our community differently, we can take measures to advise and educate our guys, our people, and the families, okay? How do we do that? This forum, you know, public speaking on this kind of stuff at different venues, you know, maybe the Special Operations Conference at Bragg, our conference, SFA, that kind of stuff. Publications and newsletters, we've got the Drop, we've got the Sentinel and other things where we can get the word out about exposure and our risk. Social media is a big one, and of course, veteran to veteran. There's still time, even though we're aging, to take steps that will increase our longevity. If, for example, colon cancer is one of the things that we have a problem with more than other people, then we know that we gotta get a damn scope, okay? Got to get checked out. And we can do that and identify problems before they kill us, okay? Live longer and be a pain in the butt to our wives. Okay. So how did we gather the information? A link to the survey was published in our newsletter, the SFA newsletter, and Facebook. Thank you, Bonnie. The survey itself was available in printed form. You could get a printed copy if you weren't computer literate or didn't want to do it on the computer. It was made available from mid-June to mid-August of this year. And again, while this will be shared as needed, it's confidential. So, the information is not going anywhere except for our use and if you decide to talk to the attorney. And it was not possible for me to acknowledge every submission. I couldn't send you back an email saying, thanks for sending this, and here's what goes on with you. Couldn't do it. Have to generalize, okay? Okay, so how do we categorize this? How do we fit the information in what kind of a box, okay? The VA presumptive diagnosis for exposure reused, the ones that the VA gives compensation for, if you got it. As you know, there are some things called presumptive diagnosis. That means if you have this condition and we're in Vietnam or around it, the VA presumes that it's related to Agent Orange and will compensate you. That's what presumptive diagnosis. Now, without medical bias. And what that means to me is, I know as a clinician that if you're heavy, 20, 30 pounds overweight, if you're sedentary, if you don't watch your diet, guess what? You're a diabetic. Doesn't have anything to do with Agent Orange. We've got plenty of diabetics out there that never even saw an Agent Orange, okay? But the VA says, if you're in Vietnam and you're diabetic, bam, okay? So they presume that. Same way with heart problems and other things. As you probably know, the VA diagnoses aren't so much medical as political. Okay? All right, so cancer was separated out from other medical diagnoses. We kind of graphed out the conditions, and I'll show you that in a little while. And the percentages were determined and compared to the the adult, the adult population of the same age group that was not exposed to Agent Orange. So, we did a little comparison stuff. Okay, so some general findings. As I mentioned, 219 responded, 209 reported exposure to Agent Orange, 185 have had health problems, 59 or 30% reported children or grandchildren with problems that they relate to Agent Orange. Some reported stillbirth. This was interesting to me because I had not previously, in my work with Agent Orange, and you've probably seen some of my previous presentations, hadn't considered the stillbirth problem, but it's there. We learned about it. And among our respondents, the major problems were cancers, 68 out of the respondents, diabetes, and heart disease. And most people who answered the survey with problems had more than one condition. Okay, so these are our cancer diagnoses. Just to throw this up on the screen, let you see what cancers were reported. There were 4 guys that said, okay, I had cancer, but they didn't tell me what it was. But they're in the unspecified group. So here's what our graph looks like. Excuse me if I get in your way here. The biggest offender is prostate cancer, as you can see. And we have bladder cancer, and then lung cancer, bladder 15%, prostate 68% of respondents who had cancer reported prostate cancer. So what that tells me, as a health and welfare guy with the SOA, is I need to educate on prostate cancer. We need to do some work. Because, especially if you're of a certain age, you're at risk. Adult males are at risk, especially black adult males, higher risk. Okay, so we've got to educate you and get you doing the preventive stuff. The reported diagnoses that are not on the presumptive VA list: thyroid, kidney, colon, laryngeal cancer, and again, unspecified. And skin, these are the ones that were reported to us, and there are 5 more that just weren't specified. Hi, Ann.
Hi, sorry.
Welcome.
I needed some coffee.
Admiral Duff is here. Attention on deck. Okay, so this is basically graphs out the cancer findings. Okay, so we kind of honed in on prostate cancer a little bit, as you can see, because it was our primary offender. And we looked at, I got in touch with the Prostate Cancer Foundation in September, and adult males over 70, that would be most of us, with prostate cancer, in the United States, about 9%. Our group, our respondents, 20% with prostate cancer. So that, you know, again, it's a small survey, a small study with a small group responding, but again, I think we may be onto something here. Okay, so did exposure to Agent Orange increase cancer risk? Survey response, any type of cancer developing, 37%. According to the NIH, percentage of adult males who develop cancer, 20%. Again, it gets our attention, right? Okay, so other reported problems are non-cancer, okay? On the presumptive list, the VA list, or possible compensation or definite compensation, diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, blood pressure, Parkinson's, unspecified skin problems, chloracne, which is a skin problem but a specific one, and high or low thyroid problems, and peripheral neuropathy was reported. The other conditions that were reported that aren't on anybody's list for compensation, pneumonia, bronchitis, you know, respiratory problems, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, fungal infections, post-traumatic stress injury, other psychiatric problems, EORIs, upper respiratory, sinusitis, and COVID. These are all reported, and guys related these to their Agent Orange exposure. Now, these are not presumptive conditions. However, a case could be made that because a person was exposed to Agent Orange, he or she now has a compromised immune system. If you have a compromised immune system, you're going to get this stuff. But again, the VA hasn't made that link, nor do I think there have been sufficient studies to prove it. Okay, so here's the reported non-cancer stuff. Ischemic heart disease is 27%, diabetes, close, just 1% above, 28%, and our peripheral neuropathy and hypertension. And the other things, the chloracne, Parkinson's, thyroid, and so forth. Peripheral neuropathy, 11 with diabetes, 8 without. Hypertension, 22 with heart disease, and 7 without. So why are we separating that out? Because diabetics, as you may know, have problems with peripheral neuropathy. What's peripheral neuropathy? You get a mild case, you get numbness and tingling, occasionally feel like you're going to sleep. Severe cases, you can't feel anything in your extremities, the involved extremities, which are usually the lower extremities. That's why amputation of a lower extremity is a complication of diabetes. Because diabetics can't feel it when they got a stone in their shoe or an infection or something going on, and they get a bad infection and it progresses quickly because of the diabetes, and the only way to save the patient is to take the leg. So peripheral neuropathy and diabetes, with and without, hypertension with and without heart disease. So is peripheral neuropathy in our response to our study, is it a function of diabetes? Well, with the diagnosis of diabetes, we had 11, and without diabetes, 8, okay? And some causes of peripheral neuropathy without diabetes are listed here: trauma, some cancers, alcoholism, malnutrition and vitamin deficiency, kidney disease, thyroid disease, or certain infections. Now, peripheral neuropathy with diabetes and without is rated by the VA, and Admiral, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I believe it's rated by the VA based on specific nerves, and they don't have a general diagnostic category that they tag for it. They have removed the requirement for neuropathy to have been resolved within 2 years after exposure. It used to be that they said, okay, you've had neuropathy, but it has to be resolved, or it's not legitimate. Okay, well, they stopped that. They removed it. Okay, so heart disease because of hypertension. We know that if you've got hypertension, high blood pressure, your heart has to work harder to push out that blood, against the backflow, if you will, against peripheral resistance. And as the heart works harder, it gets bigger. You know, muscles get bigger when they work, right? And it's something called cardiomyopathy. And my son, who's a PA out in Henderson, is looking at me. It's really simple, isn't it? But what happens is that the heart expands, you get cardiomyopathy, heart's not working as well, okay, and you get heart disease. But what we found was that hypertension with heart disease, okay, 7, but hypertension as standalone, 22. So one is not necessarily causing the other in our study, okay, and it may still be early in the game for a lot of our respondents. The legacy effect, the pass-through, this is what we're interested in, and Attorney Steve Carpenter is going to address this a bit more than I have here. But 30% of the respondents to our study said, yes, we have children with genetic damage. There was a study done by ProPublica, which is a First Amendment advocacy group out of Virginia. But they tagged this and they said, okay, 33% of Vietnam veterans have had children and grandchildren with pass-through. So it looks like with 3%, we're sort of in the margin of error here compared to the rest of the Vietnam veteran population, our guys, our special ops people. We did not collect specifics on the pass-through. In other words, we wanted to know yes, no. Did you have a child or grandchildren infected? We will dig later on to the respondents who said that we could contact them about it, and we'll find out the specifics of the pass-through stuff. So following this, we're going to find out what were the illnesses, who got it, and what were the circumstances of the parent or guardian. Okay, how has the VA responded to compensating our progeny? Looking at the Admiral. From 2001 to 2012, the VA received claims for benefits from more than 8,100 people complaining of spina bifida, which is one, and other birth defects. Of those, 1,325 received benefits. So there are a bunch that didn't. The VA's position is that further research needs to be done, and it does. And tissue, this is interesting. There were tissue and blood and semen samples taken from the guys, the crews that spread Agent Orange to do further research to find out, you know, what genetic damage and what cellular damage and so forth was done. And they're still in frozen suspension and waiting to study. Interesting. Okay. So, some problems with our study. Okay, disclosure. We weren't able to do a full scientific, full court press study on our subject, but research shows approximately 2,168,703 vets as of September are alive. What percentage were SF and special ops? I don't know. And it's very difficult to find out this kind of information. You could look at the stats of guys who were deployed to Vietnam, how many special forces guys were in Vietnam from A to B. But again, there were TDY people, there were guys that went 2 and 3 and 4 times. So it's very difficult to get an accurate number of how many there were. But our particular archives and the SOA database, 1,084 members show Vietnam as their location served out of 1,550. And thanks, Ray, for that information. Small sample. So we had a small sample to our study. Out of an unknown number of special forces and special operations Vietnam veterans, 219 or their survivors responded to our study. We are aging. Many of us are gone. There would have been, had we done this 10 years ago, so much more response. Guys are still alive. They could tell us of their problems, even though they may be suffering from terminal illness. But, a lot of us are gone. The distribution was limited. We tried to get it out, get it publicized as much as we could to everybody, but we just couldn't get it out as much as we wanted to all our SF and special ops veterans. Now, the survey did specify Vietnam veterans, realizing that in Thailand, for example, some of the perimeters were sprayed with dioxin in our compounds, Thailand. There are people on Guam that had exposure. There are people in Cambodia who went, you saw the map earlier, who went through some of the Agent Orange areas, SF guys who served there. But we were specifically concerned with Vietnam veterans. We had to narrow it down for the purposes of the study. And the demographics are generalized. Again, I mentioned, there are certain racial components to some of these illnesses, socioeconomic stuff, but again, we generalized the demographics. So, our conclusions then. Our Special Forces and Special Ops community was adversely affected by Agent Orange. Hell, we knew this from previous presentation on Agent Orange, but it's pretty determinant. And our SF people had a higher rate of developing health problems and a 10% greater risk of developing cancer than the general population, Vietnam veteran population. Cancer, heart disease, diabetes, high on the list of problems, and a significant percent of respondents, 30%, reported possible pass-through problems, genetic damage, essentially equal to the overall Vietnam veteran population. So, we now have an idea of what we need to do to help our folks. We need to publicize the medical and cancer threats because of the Agent Orange exposure. So I intend to do that. I'm going to write this up. I hope to publish it in the drop. Maybe the Sentinel, we'll see who accepts it. Educate on the risk of specific cancers and the need for surveillance and follow-up. Excuse me. Surveillance and follow-up, okay? We're probably all guilty of not doing our preventive medical checks. The colonoscopy, right? The blood draws, the prostate-specific antigen or PSA blood test, other things, our immunizations and so forth. We need to, sir?
Can I make a comment about that?
Yes, you may.
Do not trust your PSA. When I switched doctors, my doctor, I had PSA 2, which is perfect. He asked me if I wanted a physical check, and I went, no. But he did, and he found something. They tested me, I had cancer.
Thank you.
Prostate. Do not trust
Yeah,
the PSA.
the comment is don't trust the PSA test, the blood test. However, it's a good screen, okay? It's not flawless, but it's a good screen. I got you.
Do the PSA
Yep.
test, but also have physical.
Exactly. The saying is that 60% of all cancers are within reach of the finger. So, yeah, and I definitely agree with you. As a clinician, when I gave a physical to a male, I always did the prostate check, the rectal check. They didn't like it. And my wife, Vicki, being a female clinician in the Air Force, commissioned officer, used to be able to tell her troops, bend over, But, and she found cancers, and I found cancers. And you're right. Not always, the PSA isn't always in tune with that. But if I do find a PSA that's going like this, then I know that further investigation needs to be done.
That's the difference.
Roger.
Growing up, you can tell.
Okay, so let me get back to what we're doing.
Josh, one other comment.
Yes.
Some of the VAs won't give you a PSA over 70 years old. Doesn't make sense to me.
Okay. Okay. So we want to educate on surveillance and need for check. This is something that I think we need to do as a Special Operations Association Foundation. Get involved with this, is network among each other and establish a database of our children and grandchildren who may have the pass-through illnesses and problems. It may be that in the future our progeny has reason for compensation for this, but at least, again, education and to alert our folks on what needs to be done for their preventive health. And we do want to work with the VA and appropriate agencies to further determine the legacy effects of Agent Orange on not only our population, but certainly on our legacy, okay? And with that, I wanted to turn it over to Attorney Steve Carpenter to discuss the work he's done on the legacy effect.
Thanks, Doc. I'm Steve Carpenter. I'm an attorney from Idaho. No. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm an attorney from Idaho. My father. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay. I'm Steve Carpenter. I'm an attorney from Idaho. My father was Steve Carpenter. He was with Attachment B-52, Project Delta, ran recon. He died in 2016 of lung cancer, which was related to Agent Orange exposure. So if you're asking why I'm here, that's why. Okay. This does hit close to home. But after he passed, I started looking into these pass-through effects. And there really was no research in 2016, 2017 done on the children of veterans. And just, I'd like a show of hands from all the male veterans here. Who has children? Who had children after they returned from Vietnam? Who has grandchildren? Okay, this is about you guys. In 2018, the National Academies for Science, Engineering, and Medicine put out their 11th update on the effects of Agent Orange on veterans. And one of the specific targets of that study was the pass-through effects of children. And it's the first time that they ever considered paternal exposure, that's the male exposure to Agent Orange, being passed down to children. And in that study, what they found was it was certainly plausible, it's certainly possible, but they didn't have enough data to substantiate and maintain a recommendation to the VA for compensation. When I started looking into this, I contacted Doc Padgett last year at SOAR, and this project took off. So with the help of the Special Operations Association Foundation, we've gotten this survey out to a lot of you. We got over 200 responses. And I will say that the biggest roadblock in this process is we don't have enough data. You know, Doc has talked about the studies that have been previously conducted, but the issue is we don't have enough people, enough human data to go forward with another study that's going to be comprehensive enough for the VA to recognize these pass-through effects. So, a lot of these conditions, we have diabetes, asthma, autoimmune conditions, allergic conditions, cancers, leukemia, neurodegenerative diseases. There's so many things on the list that are plausibly connected. And one of the main things that I'm looking to do is get awareness of this issue out. And I need your help to do it. You know, with the help of Doc Padgett, the foundation, and word of mouth from all of you. If you can contact us, I have a stack of business cards on the table here. It has my website and a link to the SOAF page that covers the Agent Orange Legacy Project. You can contact the foundation, contact Doc Padgett, but we would love to hear from you. For all of those that raise their hands, I would love to speak with you after the presentation is over. And I have been keeping an eye on the research. In 2023, there was a study published which validated the mechanism that we believe caused this pass-through. And it used to be believed that the Agent Orange altered DNA or RNA, and that's how it was passed down to others. And that's what caused the most problems for people. What this new study in 2023 suggests is that an epigenetic change is possible in spermatogenesis. What that really means is that when you get exposed to Agent Orange, it changes the information coded into your sperm cells. And when those sperm cells are transmitted to an egg and create another human being, that misapplied information is also transmitted. And that's how it becomes a permanent mutation. Now, there's plenty of documentation in Vietnam on the Vietnamese exposed population. But that's a completely different situation to what we have here. And we don't have the research and the numbers to substantiate that. Now, once we get enough information, we have enough folks who are willing to participate in that, once we get enough information and enough folks who are willing to participate and help us out on this, what we hope to do is go to the VA with the information, to go to the National Academies for Science, Engineering, and Medicine and have another directed study focused on the Special Forces community. If we can get that accomplished, yes, sir.
So are you limiting the study to just the SLA population, or are you going to beyond that?
We're not limiting the study yet, but we are focusing on the Special Forces community. It's largely going to depend on the participation we can get. The Special Forces community is a small community, and it gets smaller every year.
Specifically, what size sample are you looking for? I think that would be helpful.
As large as we can get.
500?
As large as we can get. We're not going to have an upper limit.
Survey application or entry forms.
Could you say that again, please?
Are you still taking form entry stuff that was already presented? Are you still taking that, or is that?
Survey's closed, yeah.
No.
I couldn't hear that, John.
He said it was closed, which, okay,
For now, we've closed it.
I got a question. Because we never received that survey. And I get it, but if you want accountability, you have to ensure people receive it in order to get accountability back.
Yes, ma'am. I used the avenues that were available. Monty Cooper was big into that. Facebook and our newsletter and the SFA newsletter.
Oh, we get all that, never got it. Just saying, I'm just saying, and if we didn't, and we live in a small, little town, little tiny town, so I get it, our mail's not always the greatest. But if we're just 1% out of 1,500,
Yeah.
there's a large amount that probably didn't receive the survey.
Yeah, Scott was saying we can open up the survey again next year.
I know they can hear.
But I'm staff of one, so I need to occasionally, stop and
Start.
process the data and present what I have.
Yes, sir, I understand.
Is that fair?
It's actually addressing the sample size. Anytime you get a sample size above 30, you are developing a bell curve that is substantial. And so quite frankly, a sample size of 221 is pretty significant. You will not change the percentages measurably by getting a sample size of going from like
Yes.
200 to 500 to 1,000, and that's why I was asking the question, what sample size you need. And so, I
Yes,
think
sir.
your sample
If I
size-
could get a hold of the,
That way everybody can hear you.
If I can get a hold of that presentation, I can pass it to my SFA chapter and market this concept of generating the statistics you're looking for.
That's directed at Doc. That's Doc's presentation.
As I mentioned that I'm going to put it out as widely as possible. So stay tuned.
Okay, it'll be on the SOA website or what?
I'm going to hope to have it published by, our, the drop. And the Sentinel, which goes out to a large part of the community, and any other,
SLA newsletter?
say again?
SLA newsletter?
Yeah.
Doc, one of those microphones is hot. If you use it, everybody can hear. It might be that one or the next one, or you can turn that on.
Yes, dear.
Turn it on.
I'd also like to add, we're going to have a question and answer session after the presentation
Oh,
too.
what a sweet microphone. You look so good. I just turned on the microphone. Okay, I'm being a little bit silly, but we will get the information out as wide a distribution as possible. I need to write up, I just returned from Vietnam a couple of weeks ago, doing the work with the Mountain Yard orphanages over there. And then we put this together. But I need to write it up in suitable form for publication, both electronically and in print media, and we'll do that.
John, are you familiar with this Million Man survey?
Negative. Negative.
No.
So we can get together after?
Oh, just a question.
Yeah. He asked about the Million Man Survey, and I'm not familiar with that, but we can look into it, and thank you for that. Scott, I want to excuse myself just a minute while I'm thinking about it, because, you know, things go away. We've teamed with Vietnam Veterans of America, Scott Derrick. Scott. Steve? Is it Steve? I've got Scott here. I don't. Okay. All right. Yeah, it's Scott Dameron. Yeah.
Steve Carpenter.
No, not you.
Not me?
No. I'm talking about you.
Oh,
Scott Darman
okay.
is Vietnam Veterans of America. I bring this up because Vietnam Veterans of America is going away. So this published information probably will not be available in the future. It contains a kit for Agent Orange exposure, also information on the PACT Act, passed through to survivors and so forth. It's a nice packet. I've got probably 20 or 30 of them here on this chair in front. If you want one at the end of the talk, please take one.
So is it not available online?
Don't know. But I do know that Vietnam Veterans of America is closing down, and this won't be available in the future. So.
Yeah, I noticed, Patrick, that pancreatic cancer wasn't on your list of not presumptive diseases, and yet I know my husband passed from that and numerous other AO, causes, and it's a monster of a disease. But Admiral, during the time he had it, I did research on it, and I found Admiral Stonewall had done a study that found that veterans are 5 to 7 times more likely to get pancreatic cancer. And I'm so aware of that incident rate really showing up among so many of my, friends in the military community. And I wonder, it didn't show up on your list. Is it just still so insignificant?
No, we didn't have any respondents who responded with prostate cancer. Excuse me, with pancreatic cancer. Yeah, they're dead. Well, yeah, but there could be some who had a recent diagnosis, but we didn't. Or there was information for the survivors to fill in too. They could have told us about pancreatic cancer, and we didn't get it. But I'm going to throw it back to Steve to finish his remarks. But that might be also a question for the Admiral about what's been done with the VA.
So I will just say we're going to have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation here, and I'm going to turn this over to retired Rear Admiral Ann Duff. Thank you for your time.
I usually don't need a microphone because I'm very loud. Thank you for having me. I suspect there'll be lots of questions for me. I did want, for the question about the Million Veteran Survey, I looked it up real quickly because I know I've heard about it, but I wanted to reiterate the facts. So it started it launched in 2011, and the idea is to review how genes, lifestyle, and military experiences and exposures affect health and wellness in veterans. And there are well over 2 million veterans enrolled right now. I can see if I can get you guys, some of that information, get it pushed to you. I don't know a lot of details about it. I know I've certainly heard of it. So, to that question. I'm not sure what I know. Let me talk a little bit about birth defects that are recognized by the VA. As Doc said, for the offspring of male veterans, the only known acknowledged birth defect is that spina bifida non occulta. And I was surprised that the number was that high, that we have 1,300. I thought the number of dependents who are actually getting paid is somewhere like 10. So that's what I had heard anecdotally. My work is really with survivors, so some of the more veteran things don't necessarily come into my AOR. For female veterans, there is a whole host of female veterans who served in Vietnam who had children after they returned. There's a whole host of diseases and disabilities that are acknowledged. And, I call myself Dr. Mom, but no medical institute has ever certified me. But I think that has to do with the difference between the egg and the sperm and what may be affected by that exposure. I do know they are, like Doc mentioned, they are continuing research on that. But much like was mentioned, it's an aging population, and we have to get the veterans while we still have them. My father is 91. He served in Vietnam 2 times. He's in pretty darn good health, but he's 91. It's just we probably as a nation did not get on it fast enough, and that is certainly something that you can speak to your congressmen and senators about. That's why we have them. They fund NIH and the National Academy of Sciences. Perhaps a little grassroots efforts from, the Vietnam veteran community might help with reinvigorating some research. So I don't have anything much more to say. I'm certainly ready for any questions, or I'll take questions if I don't know the answer and get back to you. But are we ready for the question and answer? Okay, let's go.
Please use the mic so everybody can hear. Raise your hand and I'll come give it to you.
Yeah, Bill Ortman, my question is, I was exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam. Myself, I didn't have any issues. I'm 100% disabled by the VA, so I'm fully enrolled in the VA, and I'm getting all my medical care there. I have a daughter. In her mid-30s, she came down with cancer. She has nothing to do with the military. She's worked for a different government agency. What are the procedures, if any, of her getting some access to the VA if it is a possible pass-through?
At this time, there are no avenues because it's not spina bifida. And and understand that I'm not defending the VA in any way, although I work for it. Given our environment and all the talk about microplastics in our food and all the things that have happened over the past 50 years. It's not necessarily your service that would have caused her, and I'm not belittling anyone's medical challenges, but in my experience, a lot of people will get brain cancer and they were not in the military. But there's always that assumption that they were exposed to burn pits, that was caused by the military. And it's not to say that it is or isn't, but I think there are many things that could, in your children, your grandchildren, that could also have affected health issues. Is all. Did I say that diplomatically enough?
I would like to respond to that as well. That is what the Agent Orange Legacy Project is about, is trying to establish that connection, trying to establish a recognition by the VA that these are related to the service and that they are pass-through conditions. With these presumptive conditions, as the Admiral said, there are lifestyle complications and there are weaknesses in the studies, but those need to be addressed and need to be addressed in the light of presumptive conditions from Agent Orange.
Questions for us?
So say his daughter has cancer. How do you test to find out whether or not it's passed through or it's from something else? How do they go about determining that?
That is the difficulty, and that's what the research is advancing in. They have just confirmed in 2023, like I said, the mechanism for the transmissal. As far as getting the origin of it, that's what they're working on in the research right now, confirming these.
Just a comment, about a month and a half ago, I received a letter from the VA. I've got restricted airway disease, and they connected that to my exposure to Agent Orange in Vietnam. I filled out that survey, and it was quite a surprise that it came back that way. I went back to the PAC Act and reapplied, expecting 0. but because of it, it wasn't listed on that 8 or 10 cancers. I thought for sure it was going to come back as a 0, and it surprisingly went from 10% to 50%.
I just want to say, I think the importance of the context of the study for me is the son of Dr. Paget, who did have cancer, possibly from Agent Orange, who knows. Sorry. Oh, I have to stand up. Okay. So the importance is, I'm probably never going to receive benefits. I don't know if, you know, my nieces and nephews or grandchildren are. But the point for me is my brother also served in the military, and he was exposed to burn pits, which are another issue that veterans are facing. So I don't know if this will necessarily lead to validation and justification and you know, the things that we want for your generation, but for my brother's generation and the ones that follow, hopefully research like this will, you know, provoke changes as far as how we treat the next generation of veterans. So I think that's why this is very important.
Yeah, I just want to respond. Everybody, that's Matthew Paget, my son. He's in pediatrics out in Henderson. But another thing, Admiral, that I think a lot of us have in the back of our minds is that there may be some intentional foot dragging on this by bureaucracies and politicians, because once compensation is authorized for a certain demographic or a certain group, let's say our progeny in Vietnam, then comes the burn pit folks, and then comes other things, and you're talking billions, you know, just billions of dollars. And I think that there are certain people in our administration who aren't ready for that, to spend that kind of money.
Right, and what I would say is, you know, based on the history that I know, it would probably come to like a class action suit that would, you know, be, you know, the payouts would be administered by the Department of, can't hear that? Not loud now? Okay. I know, I'm sorry. Okay, so what I was saying is, you know, likely the compensation that family members would get, and this is just based on VA history, it would come as a class action suit against the VA that would then be paid out, you know, like the Niemer class lawsuit that had that payout that was administered by the Department of Justice. So you know, the compensation would probably not necessarily be like enrollment in VA healthcare or disability payment like veterans get, but more of that class action lawsuit piece. So, but I know, you know, and I'm sorry. You know, I have sort of mixed feelings. One of the reasons why I love coming here, because I love talking to you all, and I think, you know, you were treated very poorly by the nation when you returned. And I like to believe that we've learned that lesson, and one of the reasons why, you know, all the PACT Act legislation that, you know, added the burn pits, you know, I was exposed to burn pits a couple of times. I'm on the registry. But, you know, I think they realized they made a big mistake, and they're trying to be better for this next generation. And so just, you know, the sacrifices that you make and the information that you give may not necessarily help you, but that term legacy would mean that you're helping those generations that follow you, and I think that's really important, so thank you.
First off, thank you for doing this. It is humbling to be in a conference room in Las Vegas and have this be sort of my first exposure as a daughter of a veteran to some of these healthcare concerns. And so I appreciate the efforts to try to bring education and awareness, because honestly, it's desperately needed. And my two takeaways, I guess, from this conversation today, and I just want to validate with you, is what you're hoping for us to take away is, number one, what are those healthcare issues that are documented for veterans to be aware of and to pursue the preventative care that's needed. So me as a kid can hassle my wonderful veteran father about, hey, you need to be really proactive about those healthcare measures. I was there, I saw the lecture, we can't pretend anymore. And number two is we don't have enough information that particularly for the legacy, that is really the goal, is that there haven't been enough studies put together or enough surveys. And so your ask is to this generation, but probably even more to my generation, that we need to step forward and be willing to be vulnerable about what's happening with us and to advocate to understand that we can get the studies done to say, hey, cancer in 30-year-olds is higher risk or higher propensity. So those are my two takeaways. Is that what you hope that we take away from today?
Are you available to give a talk next year? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And short answer is yes. And I think I touched on the fact that we need to sort of home in on the major problems that we've identified. I plan, for example, next year to give a talk on prostate cancer here. But now, most of us in this room are forearmed and forewarned, and we know that we need to get our cancer screenings done, our regular physical checkups, and the gentleman and I had a discussion about the PSA and so forth. The tools that are available to us to screen, we need to take advantage of. And again, as a daughter or as a wife or perhaps a husband of a veteran, you guys need to keep on us. Put your spurs on, because sometimes we need it. I've given lectures before on certain health problems here, and I've had 8 or 10 people in the room, because guys, it doesn't apply to me. So we need to, like I say, keep your spurs on.
It's never too late to maybe start taking a little bit of care of yourself. Maybe do a little more walking. Maybe stop smoking. Maybe do a little less drinking. Eat a little bit better. I don't want to go overboard, but there are always things, even at any age, that you can start to do that will help. So that's right. Not the unit. That's like time off. But really, there's no reason why at any age you can't make little tweaks that may help your overall health.
Can I ask a question yet?
Yes.
Okay, I have a daughter that's had cancer. Is there a mechanism that our children can enter into this study some way or into another study, or is there one already there?
Yeah. So, again, like she's brought to our attention, it's difficult to reach out to this younger generation. For the veterans, we have the foundation, we have SOAR, we have word of mouth, we have a lot of ways to get a hold of you guys. We don't know how to get a hold of your children. This has been an outreach to try to figure out how to do that too. So
She's going to push her dad, I'll push my daughter.
Yeah. I have business cards available. I have my website. We have the foundation website. If you have ideas on how to get this out to the children, we'd love to hear it.
Thank you.
Second, you're reopening the survey then.
So the survey is still available on my website. Okay, what we did is an initial controlled population. before this presentation to see what we'd have.
If you need to contact me, you know, you can.
There's a
If you
link
need to contact me, you know that you can get a hold of me through the foundation. We have brochures on the back table if you want one of those. It's got my contact information on it. And I mentioned on one of the slides, we do want to start a database on pass-through among our group. And that's something that my foundation guys are going to work on and get started. So,
I think that's really important for
yeah,
you.
stay tuned.
You also,
You know,
sir.
it's
Get
going to
that
happen.
database, because should you all not be available, we can use that database for more research, and that, you know, so send that to the academy for information. So,
The orthopedic cancer doctor has a question.
Yes, for Admiral. So I work at Stanford, and we do a lot of database stuff. The VA has a great electronic medical record, and EHR, as much as you like it or not, has made tremendous amounts of data, not all of it accurate, available to these large AI queries. And so a problem that we have with this is selection bias and so forth. So the question is, given the robustness of these databases that exist for medical information across the general population, Medicare especially in the VA, rather than looking for individual responses, can you not turn loose AI on the information you guys already have, asking these specific questions? And AI will be able to answer it if it's given adequate access. So what inside the government, which is obviously the place where this should originate, you have very robust research capabilities. So it's just a matter of asking the right questions. What's the VA doing along those lines to take away the survey problems and just go straight to the data?
you know, I would love to tell you that all sorts of statistics on that, but again, that is not my area of expertise. You know, I do know VHA has a lot of VHA, you know, that's something that comes from those medical research universities that the VHAs, all the medical centers are closely associated with, and that would be something that would come through them. I can certainly do some research for you when I go back and perhaps get some information to you on what those queries could be or what could be done, but again, that is not my area, and so I really don't feel comfortable giving you an answer. But yes, I'm a political science major, so consider that. It would seem to me that yes, AI could help with that research and those queries.
I see him running.
Hey. Okay, this is a great presentation here this morning on the health side of it. Okay, but can I touch base just a little bit on the VA
Open
disability process? Okay, I went through it a number of years ago, starting in the 1990s, late 1990s. I just want to let all you veterans know that if you're going to put in for a disability, I have a personal friend who was adjudicator in the VA, and he told me just how the process worked, okay? You're going to get disappointed because the VA's process is, no, you don't have it. No, you don't have it. And this will go on for several times, several years, because they want to discourage you. They want you to go away and get mad and say, I'm tired of dealing with the federal government, okay? So all I'm saying to you guys is if you decide, or if you do have a disability and you want to put in for the compensation from the federal government, be patient, don't give up. He always said the most important thing you can do is find a good service officer. That be like from the Veterans Association, VBA, American Legion, VFW, whatever it is. But it's the individual that's going to push your paperwork that's going to help you get that disability. So that's just another side of what John and the group here are talking about. You know, if you get diagnosed and you need a disability, be patient. Don't give up, okay?
I'd like to refute that a little bit, quite honestly, sir. And I will tell you that the VA of today is not the VA. The VA of today is not the VA of 10 years ago, and it's certainly not the VA of 1990, and it's definitely not the VA of the 1980s. So, you know, one of the reasons why we're here is we take claims. So you don't really need a VSO. You know, we have come every year. I've come for 4 years. Last year we took 112 claims, and I can pretty much guarantee, based on the number of people who have come up to us and thanked us this year, that within that year, most of those people have gotten their claims certainly looked at and adjudicated. So I would like to qualify your statement and say that you know, the VA is much better now than they were. And like I said, that's why we're here. So if you have a claim, everyone knows how to get a hold of me. If you decide 6 months from now that you had forgotten something, you know, I can get you in contact with, you know, my people that I bring. But that's why we're here, is for you to be able to do those claims. So, you know.
Okay, I did specify 10.
Okay, that's right. Like I said, I just, you know, again, that's why we're here. So, you know, I'm from the VA and I'm here to help, so.
But is not every state different?
No. What do you mean?
Every state claim for VA is a different filing. It's a different filing process, or their payout is different per state.
No. No. Everything is the same.
Payout's the same, but when you file it, because I know we have friends in Montana that have the exact same ratings and everything else that we have in Texas, and it's different. Their filing process is different than our filing process.
Like the county veteran service officers?
Each state has a little bit different process. That's true. In Arizona, we have a State Department of Veteran Services, and they have a cadre of service officers that process those claims. Okay. Now, a lot of states use county offices, so that's a little bit different. But they're still service officers. They're still certified to make claims. And then the VA has service officers who can take those claims directly. So, and you know, the American Legion, VFW, VVA, all have service officers that are certified through the State Department in Arizona. I'm sure it's the same way. You know, they get certified other ways. So there's different kind of pathways, but the process is the same. So if I've got a claim for PTS, my claim is going to look just like the claim from somebody from New Jersey. It may have been taken by a different person. So that's the only thing. The other thing I would add to this is, do not think that you're so smart that you can make the claim on your own. That is the biggest mistake that everybody makes. Get a service officer, get a good service officer. I was undergoing, pardon me? Say again? Well, you could start with your American Legion, VFW, DAV, VVA, those folks. You could start there.
We live in Indiana, and our service officer, DAV, is from New Jersey.
Well, quite honestly,
Well-
you can cut out the middleman and
Yeah.
find out why here.
Yeah.
Again,
So- Yeah. So my point is, you know, get yourself a good claims officer. I was undergoing chemo at the VA, heard a couple of nurses who were Navy veterans talking about their difficulty in getting VA claims. And I said, come on over here. And we chatted, and I directed them to the fellow that I'd been using for several years, several claims. And the following month, they came back, and they just said, world of difference. And they were on their way to success. So yeah. And one other quick, you know, it's a little bit like dating, you know, that first one may not be the one. So, you know, get out there and, you know, keep going until you find somebody who does it for you. I mean, it's just the way it is. So, thank you.
All right, we're running over time here, and I know you're all anxious to get going. Great conversations and great questions, and thank you for my contributors that weren't actually on the program. Thanks to the Admiral. Thanks, Steve, for adding your expertise here. Don Benjamin, where are you? One more? Sure.
Yeah, I have a daughter and a niece that have autoimmune disease. Where can we, they're saying that's just part of it. My daughter has it with arthritis really bad. Then my niece is coming up with all kinds of diseases. Where can we go, or who can we talk to, or how do we explain to their doctors that their dad's was in Vietnam and sprayed with Agent Orange? Because, I had never thought about Agent Orange affecting my kids or my niece. Never did cross my mind till you brought it up just now.
Does the National Academy of Sciences have a database for that? They don't keep database. One of the places that I go to get some of my information is the National Institute of Health, Institutes of Health. And if you Google them, they'll come up, and you got to do a little digging in there to get the information. But I think if you go into your physician armed with some of this information, that will enable them to dig a little bit deeper and perhaps come up with a treatment plan for you that's satisfactory. We all sort of need to be proactive about it.
So should the girls tell their doctors that their fathers was sprayed with Agent Orange in Vietnam?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think the girls, I know my daughter hasn't done it, and my niece, I don't know if she has or not, but my brother that was in Vietnam, he was sprayed every day for 13 weeks with Agent Orange.
As a clinician, I'm retired now, but as a clinician, I try to get a good social history, and that's part of it. But today, your physician isn't going to automatically think about Vietnam and Agent Orange and any of that.
I didn't.
You got to get the information to them. But yeah, you can do some research and go in armed with some of these things and have a better discussion.
All right, because that might help with diagnosing them or giving them the right medication or whatever, of knowing if they did, if you don't know their back history.
And again, a reminder that your children need to have their preventive care. The breast cancer checks and the cervical cancer checks and all of this, as well as the specific stuff. Right.
Yeah. Now the girls do. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Just make sure your doctors really have Agent Orange exposure.
Yeah. I don't think they have.
Then when the AI goes and is searching all the records, it's the Agent Orange.
Okay.
A lot of civilian doctors will do that.
Do what? Me?
Okay. So
patients, most electronic medical records, patients can go in and put in their own query, and then it's in the readable record of the AI. So just make sure Agent Orange
is spoken into the record by some entity, and these new algorithms will find that when they're looking for these kind of things, and it'll perpetuate through the records.
okay. Well, again, thank you, everyone. Did you find this helpful?
Yes.
Was it okay? All right. Good. Yeah. So, give us feedback. Contact us if you need to, and God bless you. And we'll see you next year.